On the night of March 5, 1963, the air above Tennessee was full of wind, rain, and a storm system that seemed to move with a mind of its own. But far below it, in a small twin-engine plane cutting through the darkness, sat a woman whose voice had already changed American music forever. Patsy Cline. At just 30 years old, she had risen from poverty, heartbreak, and broken bones to become the most powerful female voice in country music. A voice that felt almost too heavy for one lifetime. But legends do not get special treatment from the sky. Somewhere between the shivering clouds and the ground waiting beneath them, something went wrong, something sudden, something final. And for decades, the exact sequence of events has been discussed, debated, and quietly feared by every pilot who has ever flown through a storm they were not sure they could outrun. This is the story of the night Patsy Cline never came home. Before there was tragedy, there was a young woman named Virginia Patterson Hensley. Most people never knew her real name. They only knew the voice, sharp as truth and soft as mercy, that would one day be called the greatest in country music. But long before her name was printed on posters and record sleeves, she was a child in Winchester, Virginia, living in a small house filled with arguments, scattered meals, and long stretches of silence. Her father left early in her life, leaving behind a trail of confusion that she would never fully resolve. Patsy grew up fast, harder than most, determined to control the only thing that had ever made sense to her, her voice. She sang in the kitchen, the yard, the church, and anywhere she could escape the heaviness inside her home. Her mother noticed at first not just the sound, but the strange maturity in it, as if Patsy had lived 100 years before she ever opened her mouth to sing. By her teens, Patsy was performing in local bars and halls that smelled of cigarette smoke, spilled beer, and exhaustion. She walked into those rooms like she belonged there. She didn't, but her voice did. It filled the ceiling, spilled down the walls, and wrapped around people who didn't even know her name yet. And for the first time in her life, she found something close to control. But fame, even the smallest seed of it, is dangerous. It grows fast. It asks for more than it gives. Throughout her early career, Patsy took jobs no one else wanted, singing until her throat burned, traveling through cities she couldn't pronounce, sleeping in motels where the walls were so thin she could hear every argument, every cough, every nightmare happening on the other side. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. She wanted to break through something: poverty, obscurity, destiny, she didn't know what, only that she had to keep going. Then came the accident. In 1957, Patsy was driving in Nashville when another car crashed into her at high speed. The impact crushed the dashboard into her chest and threw her onto the windshield with enough force to nearly kill her. She suffered a dislocated hip, broken ribs, and facial wounds that doctors weren't sure they could reconstruct perfectly. But the real fear came later when she asked one question: "Will I still be able to sing?" The doctors didn't know. During her recovery, she lay in the hospital listening to machines clicking, breathing, and buzzing around her. She stared at the ceiling, wondering whether her voice, the one thing she had built her entire identity on, would return. She feared losing it more than losing her life. But when she finally attempted to sing again, her voice came back deeper, stronger, and somehow more human than before. It carried pain, honesty, and history. It carried her. It became, for a brief moment, unstoppable. Her career exploded after that. She recorded the songs that would define her legacy. "Crazy," "I Fall to Pieces," "She's Got You." They weren't just hits. They were confessions. She sang heartbreak like she had swallowed it. She sang longing like she had lived it in every breath. Audiences didn't just listen to her. They felt her. But fame brought new pressures. Touring schedules, long nights, and the constant demand to perform even when she was exhausted or ill. Patsy pushed through it all. She had always pushed through pain. That was who she was. Then came the night she boarded the plane. It wasn't her concert. She was attending a benefit performance in Kansas City for a DJ who had died in a car crash. Patsy sang because she believed in honoring people. She sang because she knew what loss felt like. And she sang because, at 30 years old, she finally understood how fast life could disappear. After the show, she tried to leave the city, but low clouds blocked the runways. She was stuck for a night, then two. Her friends urged her to stay longer, to wait out the bad weather. But Patsy was restless. She had been away from home too long, and her children had been asking for her. She had promised to return soon. She accepted a seat on a Piper PA-2 Ford Comanche owned by Randy Hughes, her manager and a competent but not highly experienced pilot. Also on board were fellow entertainers Cowboy Copas and Hawkshaw Hawkins. They were traveling as a small group, the way musicians often did in those days, sharing rides, splitting costs, trusting each other more than they trusted strangers. The plane left Kansas City in the early afternoon. From the ground, it looked calm enough. But weather patterns across the central United States were changing rapidly, becoming unpredictable. There were pockets of fog, sheets of fast-moving rain, and low visibility that shifted minute by minute. Still, they continued. At each refueling stop, airport staff noticed the same thing. Patsy looked tired, not physically, emotionally, as if she had something on her mind that she couldn't name. At one stop in Dyersburg, Tennessee, she spoke with the flight service station manager. He warned her and the pilot that the weather was worsening. The sky was unstable. The winds were sharp and inconsistent. She listened quietly. Then she said the words that would later become part of her legend. "I've come this far. I'll go on." Some people later said she looked peaceful when she said it. Others said she sounded resolved, as if the decision had already been made long before the flight. No one knows for sure, but she boarded the plane again, took her seat, and buckled her belt. As the plane took off, the last people to see her alive recalled something unusual. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't talking. She was staring out the small window, watching the sky swallow the plane whole, as if she already understood that the storm wasn't just weather. It was waiting. The Piper Comanche lifted into the Tennessee sky with a kind of shaky confidence, like a runner who can feel the ground slipping under their feet but keeps pushing forward anyway. The aircraft was small, light, and responsive. But in weather like this, responsiveness could turn into vulnerability without warning. Inside the cabin, Patsy sat quietly. She wasn't afraid of flying. She had flown many times for tours, recordings, and appearances. What unsettled her wasn't the sky, it was the silence. The kind that fills a plane when everyone is trying to reassure themselves that the worst will hold off just long enough. Cowboy Copas muttered something about hoping the rain didn't get any ideas. Hawkshaw Hawkins adjusted his seatbelt, his jaw clenched. Their pilot, Randy Hughes, remained focused, watching instruments that were beginning to show signs of atmospheric instability. The altimeter needle trembled. The wind indicator twitched. Small changes, but enough to make any pilot pay attention. Still, they pressed on. The first 30 minutes were uneventful. The plane cut through light turbulence, the kind that rattles metal and sets the stomach floating, but nothing serious. But below them, the storm system was growing, branching, closing gaps. Its tendrils began creeping across their flight path like dark fingers searching for something to claim. Pilots in the region were calling in warnings. Visibility was dropping. Wind shear sudden, violent changes in wind speed and direction was being reported in multiple pockets. Some aircraft diverted, others turned back, but the Comanche kept going. Randy wasn't reckless, he was determined. He believed he could make it. He believed the weather was a challenge, not a threat. And he believed he owed it to the passengers, 3 performers, all with upcoming shows, obligations, families, and fans. People trusted him, and he didn't want to disappoint them. But the sky doesn't care about promises. The first real jolt hit near Camden. A sudden downward push of air slammed the plane 100 feet lower in less than a second. Patsy grabbed the armrest, startled but silent. The other men exchanged looks, the kind men share when they both feel a fear they don't want to say aloud. Randy steadied the aircraft and continued. He banked slightly left, trying to avoid a mass of dark clouds ahead. But the storm wasn't something he could navigate like a river. It was more like a shifting maze, one that changed shape faster than he could react. The visibility began to collapse, first from 10 miles to 5, then to 2, then to less than 1. Rain hammered the windshield so violently it sounded like gravel. The horizon disappeared. Sky and earth blurred, then blended completely, and the plane was suddenly flying in a gray, depthless void. This is the nightmare scenario for any pilot flying under visual flight rules. The world disappears. Your senses lie to you. Your instincts betray you. And the only truth left is inside the instrument's small, fragile, imperfect machines that must be trusted completely. Randy tried to remain calm. He monitored the attitude indicator, the turn coordinator, the vertical speed gauge. They were beginning to contradict each other, slightly at first, then more noticeably. This is what pilots call spatial disorientation. It happens when the inner ear can no longer feel what is up, what is down, or what is level. The body insists one thing. The instruments insist another. Many pilots have died trusting the wrong one. In the cabin, Patsy felt the plane tilt. Not dramatically, but enough for her heart to shift in her chest. She had lived through worse pain than most people could imagine: broken bones, shattered ribs, the violence of a steering wheel hitting her face years earlier. But this was different. This felt like something closing in. A memory drifted into her mind, her daughter asking her when she would come home. Patsy had smiled and said, "Soon?" A simple promise, a mother's promise. One that should have been easy. Another violent bump shook the plane, harder this time. A sound like metal flexing under pressure filled the cabin. Hawkshaw Hawkins whispered a prayer under his breath. Coppice pressed his hand against the wall of the fuselage as if he could steady it from the inside. No one said what they were thinking. That they were losing altitude, that they were drifting off course, that the storm had swallowed them whole. Randy fought to regain a stable climb, but the winds forced the plane sideways, then downward again. The Comanche wasn't built for this level of turbulence. The wings strained, the engines wind, and the storm seemed to be tightening its grip around them. Then, for a brief moment, they broke into a pocket of calmer air, soft, quiet, still, a deceptive calm, the kind storms offer right before delivering their worst. Some witnesses on the ground later said they heard the plane's engine before they saw anything, a distant humming, struggling against the wind. They described the sky as dirty gray, swirling, unpredictable, almost alive. Randy radioed for assistance, but signal strength was weak. His voice broke through in pieces, static snippets of words, an unfinished sentence. The transmission faded before anyone could answer him. Inside the plane, Patsy closed her eyes, not to sleep, not to pray, but to steady herself. She had always been a fighter, but something about this felt less like a battle and more like a verdict already written. She felt the plane tilt again, sharper this time. Randy checked the instruments. His gut screamed that they were banking right. The attitude indicator insisted they were banking left. His hands hesitated at the controls for a split second. A split second in a storm is too long. A massive downdraft grabbed the plane and flung it downward. The Comanche dropped fast, so fast that all 4 passengers lifted slightly from their seats. Gravity loosened its grip. Stomachs rose. Breaths caught mid-throat. The engine struggled to regain power. Rain and wind pounded the fuselage as the aircraft spun into a descending turn. Randy fought the controls with everything he had. His muscles strained, his heartbeat thudded in his ears. But the storm had decided. Patsy felt something she had felt only once before, the moment in her car accident where time slowed into a strange, painful clarity. A sense that something irreversible was already happening. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She just whispered something softly, too softly for anyone else to hear. Maybe a name, maybe a goodbye, maybe a prayer. Then the treetops appeared, dark, silent, waiting. The plane was too low, too fast, too unstable, and the storm showed no mercy. The first to reach the crash site were not officials or investigators. They were local residents, farmers, families, and neighbors from the small community outside Camden, Tennessee. They had heard something in the storm, a sound that didn't fit. Not thunder, not wind. Something heavier, final, a thud that rolled through the trees and settled in their bones. When they followed the noise into the woods, flashlights trembling in their hands, the rain had begun to ease. The storm was pulling away, leaving behind a trail of broken branches, mud-slick ground, and a smell in the air that none of them ever forgot: rain, gasoline, and splintered metal. The Piper Comanche had struck at a steep angle, hard, fast, too fast to allow a second chance. Scattered pieces of the aircraft lay across the forest floor, shredded aluminum, twisted wiring, cloth torn from seats. The trees around the impact site bore deep scars. One trunk had a gash so wide it looked like the hand of something enormous had clawed it open. The silence afterward was eerie. The storm had been loud enough to drown out the crash itself, but now the woods felt emptied of sound, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. By dawn, law enforcement and rescue teams had arrived. The scene was somber. Investigators moved slowly, stepping carefully around debris out of respect and necessity. Word spread quietly at first, then rapidly for passengers. No survivors. Among them, one name made the air heavier. Patsy Cline. The officers didn't speak it loudly. They said it softly, almost as if saying it too clearly might alter the world in some permanent way. The news rippled outward like a shockwave. First through Tennessee, then across radio stations nationwide, then into countless homes where families paused what they were doing and stared at their radios in disbelief. Some thought they had misheard, some hoped it was a rumor. Some prayed for a correction that never came, but the truth held firm. Patsy Cline, just 30 years old, mother of two, survivor of life's harshest blows, was gone. And the world felt it instantly. At her home in Nashville, her husband received the call and dropped into a chair, unable to speak. Her children didn't understand at first. They kept asking when she was coming back. Someone tried to explain gently. Someone else tried to distract them. The house, once full of Patsy's laughter and music, felt suddenly hollow. Back at the crash site, the investigation continued with methodical precision. The NTSB team studied every fragment, every impact angle, every clue the wreckage could offer. But storms do not leave tidy explanations. They leave chaos, confusion, and gaps. Still, a picture began to form. The storm had produced a lethal combination: low visibility, powerful downdrafts, and unpredictable wind shear. The plane had entered conditions that overwhelmed its capabilities and the pilot's ability to maintain control. Randy Hughes, though trained, was flying under visual flight rules in an environment that denied every visual reference. Spatial disorientation, silent, invisible, deadly, had taken hold. The investigators wrote their findings with accuracy but not coldness. They understood the gravity of what had happened. They understood that 4 lives, all of them beloved in their families and communities, had ended within seconds. They understood that millions of fans would be grieving someone they felt they knew. But they also understood something else, something people rarely talk about. A crash like this doesn't just end lives. It leaves questions that will never have answers. What were the final moments like? Did anyone see hope flicker before it faded? Did Patsy, whose voice had carried thousands through their darkest moments, have one last thought, one final image, one memory bright enough to cut through the storm? No investigator can write that. No report can measure it. No witness can confirm it. Some mysteries stay in the sky. In the days that followed, Nashville became a city in mourning. Radio stations played her songs for hours, sometimes without commentary, just the crackle of vinyl and the voice that now carried more weight than ever. Fans gathered outside the Grand Ole Opry, leaving flowers, notes, and photographs. Many cried openly. Some stood in silence, unable to speak. Some whispered the same question over and over. How could someone so powerful, so singular, be gone so suddenly? But loss often magnifies legacy. Patsy's music, already beloved, took on a new kind of resonance, a mixture of beauty and ache. When people heard her sing "I Fall to Pieces," they heard something deeper now. When she sang "Sweet Dreams," they wondered if she had ever sensed how short her time would be. When she sang "Crazy," they felt the truth in her voice with a sharper edge. Her fellow musicians mourned her in their own ways. Some wrote songs, some visited her family. Some couldn't bring themselves to attend the funeral because they knew the sight of her casket would be too much to bear. Johnny Cash reportedly stood for a long time at the back of the service, hat in hand, unmoving. But the question that lingered longest wasn't about the crash mechanics or the Investigation S findings. It was something more human. Why her? Why then? Why in a storm she didn't even want to face? The answers were nowhere and everywhere. Fate, weather, timing, instinct, each one played a role. Each one left its mark. As the years passed, stories began to circulate. Not myths meant to dramatize, but recollections from people who had seen her in those final days. Friends remembered her behaving calmly, almost peacefully, as if she felt something shifting in the air around her. Some said she had talked more openly about life and its fragility. Others recalled her saying things that felt, in hindsight, like unintentional goodbyes. One friend claimed she spoke about how, when your time comes, it comes. Another said she wasn't afraid of death, only of not living fully before it arrived. Whether these memories were perfect or shaped by grief, no one can say, but people clung to them. Because they offered one small comfort, maybe Patsy felt complete. Maybe she had sung everything she needed to sing. Maybe the storm took her body, but her voice was already immortal. In the decades since the crash, her legacy has not faded. It has grown, year by year, listener by listener, generation by generation. Young singers study her phrasing. Country legends speak her name with reverence. Fans who weren't even born when she died still cry when they hear her voice because it sounds like someone who understands them. The woods near Camden eventually healed. New trees grew. Moss covered the scars. The crash site is peaceful now, quiet and still, almost unaware of the moment it once held. But people who visit say the air feels different there, heavier, colder, as if the earth remembers. The storm that claimed Patsy Cline did not win. It took a life, but not her story, not her voice. Not the echo she left in every song. And maybe that is the strange mercy in all of this. Some voices end, but some continue long after the sky has gone silent.